Good morning. I'm going to be painting this with DIY clay-based paint and then putting a transfer on. You normally don't prime or have to prime, especially when it's not a slick surface, before you use the clay and chalk-based paints. I'm going to prime this because it's old. It's been in someone's shed for years, and someone built it before that. The closer you get to look at it, the more you can see the materials. This is just plywood, so when the plies, like if the cut edges get wet, they can expand and things like that. So I want to protect this so that whoever does own it in the future doesn't have a piece of furniture that has any kind of fail later on. And also, when you have something old like this, and this is just a dark stain, but it was also on sort of irregularly, and I don't know for how many years, you can end up with what's called bleed through, and that's after you've put on all of your layers of paint and then you put on your top coat. Then it begins to have yellow or brown areas come through here and there that mess up your whole finish, and you've done all that work and it's sort of disappointing. So I don't want that to happen, because my husband and I have a lot of hours in this already, and I want to do a good job. So I'm using this Bullseye 123 primer. And whenever you're using a primer, especially whenever you're going over something, let's see if I can get up there a little bit, especially when you're going over something dark, you want to use a colored primer like this one is like a light gray rather than a white, because believe it or not, white is actually a little harder to cover than the gray. Sometimes I know you see rust colored primers and lighter and darker gray colored primers, and that, or you can get your primers tinted, but that's depending on what your final coat is going to be. And our final coat is going to be sort of gragey, different colors, beiges and grays, and maybe a little bit of blue, so it's going to be lighter for the most part. So this is a good color primer. I'm glad that's what I had on hand. I didn't go buy it. And I found this, I don't know, each of these kind of rollers have these different colored lines and things on them that indicate if you are a frequent painter with that kind of thing, to let you know, oh, that's for smooth surfaces, or oh, that's for rough surfaces. I have no idea what kind of surface this is really for, because I just grabbed this one out of my husband's paint box. It wasn't one of mine. I couldn't find mine this morning. And that's what happens when you have half of your painting stuff at home and half of your painting stuff at work. But anyways, I love this little bucket thing, and it probably should have a liner, but I don't have a liner. And you can see the last two paint colors that I used in it. But I have the smaller bucket for hand painting, but this one works with a little roller. I got this at Sherwin-Williams. So you don't want to, even if I could fit my roller in this can, you don't want to contaminate the rest of your paint. Learned a good tip from Jennifer Allwood yesterday. Remember not to pour, if you're going to pour your paint out and possibly be sloppy, don't pour it over your label and then not be able to tell later on what it is that you have. But I just wanted to come to you this morning and talk about the fact that I am going to prime this. You can see, I think, on this footboard piece where there has been a little sanding of some sort there, and anytime it's been sanded or cut or fiddled with since the first finish goes on, then you have the chance of tannins from the wood bleeding through. So I'm going to use a chip brush, which is these little El Cheapos. We sell these at our store for like $1.50. You can get them at Lowe's for like $1.50, Home Depot, wherever you shop. And you can throw this away afterwards. This primer, I don't know if it's water-based or if it's oil-based. It says improves height and coverage of deep color paint, sticks to all surfaces without sanding, seals uniformly, blocks stains, dries in 1 hour, used with any top coat, mold and mildew resistant film. It says water-based interior and exterior, so that's kind of odd to me that it can be an exterior with a water base, but it is what it is. Anyways, around the spindles and in the little crevices and things like that, obviously I'm not going to be able to do that with a roller, so I'm going to do that with my chip brush, which if it's not easy to clean at the end, I'm going to chunk. And the larger flat surfaces, I'm going to paint with the roller so that I don't leave a million brush marks. So let's start with the little rolling part and see how that goes. very careful to make sure there's no runs or anything like that. But this piece, and I know that it's going to be hard to tell from the camera, this piece is flat right here. Whoever built this is probably a porch rail, for some reason decided to flatten off the edges of the rounded pieces. And I'm guessing that was a decorating style that they were going for. But that did leave those areas more prone to cannon bleeds and having the inner parts of the wood coming through the finish later on. So I definitely want to make sure and get a good coat of the primer on those areas to prevent any kind of bleed through in my finish later on. This piece is going to be kind of distressed in the long run, so if anything does bleed through or I make a mistake, you know, I'm at the age where you wear glasses hanging around your neck because you can't see to walk in them. You can't, and you can't see up close without them. But I don't know what led to that. But anyway, if I'm doing this and rushing through it like this and I miss a place, not miss a place, but miss a drip or something like that, or I do end up with a little bit of a tan and bleed through, anyway, I'm going to distress it. So those would be areas that I would just sand. So there's no, you know, don't kick yourself and say, oh no, I'm not professional. I had a run, or I had an area that had a bleed through and I should have put more on it or something like that. We're not going for perfection here. We're supposed to be enjoying ourselves and enjoying the process of doing the painting. I'm going to continue with this until this is all primed, and if it's not too hot later, it's going to be too hot later. If I can get a fan hooked up, I'm going to continue to work, but I'm going to come down and start putting my first coats of paint on it. If not, I'll put my first coats of paint on it in the morning. I talked about this being from plywood and me worrying about it, you know, with it being so humid in Louisiana, it ever starting to swell through those areas. So I'm actually going to put a couple of coats of the primer there in areas where the plies of the, that's what plywood is. Plywood is several ply. Plywood is very thin pieces of wood all glued together to make it stronger than an actual piece of solid wood. And it's a little bit less expensive because they can use all the ugly pieces and the scraps and things like that. But that does, once you cut into it, or even if you don't cut into it, the ends and the corners and the edges, plywood is not solid wood. That I've been out to buy a lot of pieces from people over the years that say solid wood, and then you get there and it's, you know, plywood or pressed wood with veneer on the outside that makes it look like it's a piece of solid wood, but it's not. And a lot of people believe plywood is solid wood. Plywood is not solid wood. Plywood is a bunch of thin plies of wood all glued together with wood glue and pressed down in a factory in order to make a very strong yet less expensive than trying to find an original board that's 4 foot by 8 foot, which is the standard size of a piece of plywood. It would be very, very expensive to buy a piece of hardwood that size because it would take a very huge tree to make a piece of plywood that size. But sometimes they, like even for what they would call cabinet grade plywood, it looks on the outside like birch or oak or things like that, and people think, oh, I have oak cabinets, and really they have plywood cabinets that have a piece of very, very thin wood on the outer edge, which is the piece that would show to the front, and that's called veneer. And that veneer is heat pressed or sort of like ironed on there to give it the appearance of being a solid piece of wood. But in reality, it's plywood with the outer ply being a very thin piece of very pretty wood, which lets the very pretty wood go further and be a whole lot less expensive. Generally, if you look at real wood cabinetry, you're gonna see pieces of wood that are maybe 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, all put together. And the way that they do that is through clamps and glue. They cut all the edges straight, start with the factory edge, or you go through a table saw to make both edges completely straight so that it can glue all the way down. Real quick and share a couple of blending tips. I've been working on the bench that we're making out of an old headboard, or actually 2 headboards and a footboard. And last night I came in and put the first coat of my light color paint for this project, which is Faded Burlap by DIY. And then I couldn't help myself to go ahead and go around the edges with the darker, and I've used all of that now. And that is the Prairie Gray. But I wanted to give you 1 or 2 more tips. I'm coming in with the third color, which is Sandy Blonde, which is not exactly in the same color family as the other 2. So a lot of times you're looking for colors that mesh together to blend well together, unless you're going, you know, with polar opposites. But I wanted to show you that I'm doing this on purpose because I want it to kind of highlight here in the middle. So I've actually, you can see where I came back around with the dark this morning, and then it just looks a little splotchy here in the middle. That's where I put the Sandy Blonde. And I've splotched a little through the center of all of the areas, actually. And now I'm going to blend over it. And this misting bottle, you can get these on Amazon, or we have them at our store. You can get them at beauty supply houses or things like that. When you're working with a clay-based paint or a chalky paint, you can always reactivate that paint with the misting bottle. I'm using my Paint Pixie brushes, and these hold a tremendous amount of paint. As I've told you before, there's a good breeze coming through here this morning. My paint's actually drying pretty fast. So I wanted to give you the tip to use the misting bottle to keep that wet, so your brush will keep flowing. My brush is already wet. I just cleaned it because I was using it this morning. But I'm going to come back over with my lighter, or my main color, which is what was that, Faded Burlap? Which is the Faded Burlap, but I want a little light to be reflected off of this centerpiece, so that's why I went ahead and put in the Sandy Blonde. And I actually chose Sandy Blonde for this because that color is reflected in the seat cushion that I have here, that'll be on the final project. So the darker color, the lighter color, and then another corresponding lighter color. This could have been a white or anything else, but because I know that it will blend in well with my cushion in the long run, I went with that color. So you want to start with a damp brush. I'm just dipping my brush in my little bucket of water here. I know I don't have you far enough back to see everything. And then I'm going to mist. I'm going to work on this pieces. I think that's what you can see the best. And this isn't like a squirt bottle you get in lawn and garden, to where it's power spraying on a gush of water here and there that's going to create a lot of runs. I don't want any runs on this. That's not the type of project that I'm working on. But I am going to mist and sort of dampen and what they call reactivate this paint with this mister. And it's so hot out here that it's actually drying about as fast as I spray it on. I got a little bit too much water on my brush. I can feel it dripping down, which would cause a drip later, but I'll just wipe it back off. So I'm going to keep working at it. So you can see with this lighter color, I'm going right over the darker color I have on the edges. I'm going right over the Sandy Blonde I have in the middle. I'm not getting a ton of paint. I'm just getting a tad of paint on the tip of my brush. With the Paint Pixie brushes, they hold so much that you can make it all the way across. If I was using a chip brush or a cheaper brush and trying to make it all the way across, it wouldn't hold enough paint for me to make it all the way across. Normally, you don't spend a whole lot of time going back and forth in your paint, but because I pre-misted it and I have water on my brush and keeping it flowing there, and then this is holding so much water and paint, I'm able to do that. So it may seem to the naked eye, why would you, or if you've not blended in this fashion before, why in the world would you put the other color in the middle and then cover it back up? Why would you put the darker colors on the edges and then cover it back up. And it all has to do with depth and the perception of light, and where the light would normally hit the piece and where the piece would age the fastest in the real world if this were the original finish, which is kind of the look that we're going for. And the way that you get that depth and you get that light is by adding it in with paint. That's sort of the miracle of the paint here. It's already drying a little. I'm going to mist it a little more. But hopefully you can see where it is still lighter in that very middle, and a little bit, just a little bit of a different tone. I'm going to continue with this procedure all the way around the piece. The side panels each have the darker and then the sandy blonde in the middle, and I'm going to go over them from head to toe with this faded burlap, and then I'll post you some pictures later today showing how it comes out. I appreciate you checking it out, and if you're interested in one of the Paint Pixie brushes or in the DIY paint, I'll drop some links down in the comments. So we got a 3-inch piece, and we had to get it 24 inches wide, even though at the time I needed 18, but that was a blessing in disguise because we ended up with a seat that was 20 1/4 inches. So that worked out. So there's the other piece of it. So we cut this down to size, and we cut it with a serrated knife. And this, one of my treasures, this was my Papa's Montgomery Ward staple gun. I will use it. Under here we have the board, and then over, and right now I have this stuff on top of it because I sprayed a little of this 1,000-year-old can of spray adhesive that Eric had to hold my foam to the board. And then I'm going to place some of this batting. And I think it was $89 for this piece of foam, so that's going to be the most expensive part of the entire project. But you need a high density foam so that you'll have a comfortable cushion. And if we're going to spend this much time and effort on a project, I do want to have a good quality product. But after you it shows a little bit here. This is your foam and a cushion wrap, your fabric, and I'm not making a sofa here, but anyway, I used my coupon on this at Hobby Lobby the other day. It was regularly $20, so I got 40% off, so that's $8 off of that. So what is that, $12? I paid $12 for this, and this unrolls into a big piece of batting, and it will go over to sort of soften the edges of the corners and give just a little, and soften the edges here, give just a little bit more to the cushioning. And then after that is stapled on, I will add the fabric. This is the fabric I chose. I got this at Hobby Lobby as well, and Hobby Lobby has 30% off on fabric, so I paid $50 for this piece of fabric. And if there's enough left over afterward, I might make a little throw pillow out of that piece of cushion in this. What we did was measure the distance from here to here, mark the center point, and then I wanted the top of this about 2 inches down to get this a little higher than center on the center of the back. And Eric helped me with that. We used some painter's tape, which shouldn't pull off any of my paint that's behind it. But last night I ran down here real quick and I used some banana peel by Drunk Monkey Paint Company to go ahead and put matte top coat over the paint so that this could adhere to that and not mess up the paint if I had to try to pull it off. So we've got that as the background, and it's dried. It does dry very quick. And this we pulled off of this big sheet. It was just barely on it. It's not like it was stuck on there or anything. But the way this works, now we got it taped where we want it. It's on a like piece of plastic like this, and then this part is sticky. So I'm not happy with this either, to tell you the truth, because there's a little bit of a mauve color in there that doesn't match the cushion that I made. So I will look at it for a couple of days and decide whether I'm going to come back with some blue paint and put a little bit of blue on these outer two roses to try to tie them in a little bit better with the color of the cushion. And what I understand from the instructions, we've already, Eric helped me get the bubbles out on this piece. Now we have this little stick that came with it, and I'm going to use this stick. Let me see if I can pull you a little bit closer. This is like a rub-on transfer. I feel like I've done the whole thing, but then I feel like I haven't, so one more time. Okay, I'm gonna try to lift this off and see if it has stayed. There's something that didn't. There's that down. That on. Come on, transfer that energy. Shoot, the paint's taking the paint off. I mean, the tape's taking the paint off. So that's something that I'll have to repair because of using the tape on the paint. But I believe the transfer came out in a relatively decent area as to where it should have been. And I believe that it looks okay on there. It's going to stay. I'm not going to take it off. And the next step will be going over what do you do if you believe your transfer doesn't match with the rest of your piece and touching up, because I am going to come in and touch up a little bit on these flowers, because if I don't, I'm going to have to recover the whole cushion, and I'm not going to do that. So I hope you learned from that a little bit. So thanks for watching and keeping up with the project. I appreciate you.